Hello guys, and welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to talk about the GNU Autotools and really what we use them for when we're building Emacs from source on Ubuntu 25.04, the computer system that I'm using. Let's just go ahead here and add some text highlighting so that we can see a little bit more. And then we'll go ahead here with the introduction here. So in this lesson, we're going to learn about using the Autoconf configure and the make and tools like GCC to build your software from source on Ubuntu 25.04. Keep in mind that typically most software, you don't get to see how it's put together so that you can build it from source, and you don't get to build it from source. You don't really get the source files for proprietary software. For Windows.exe, for example, you don't know how to build it from source, but the process is similar. There's some scripts that bring the whole source code together into an executable, and the open source world makes those processes available to the user. So that's really what we are looking at here, is how this is done so that we can learn a little bit about building software, about making software. And in the GNU Autotools, there are these tools: Autoconf, configure, make. GCC is the compiler. And these tools, they really help us to build the software from source. And we're going to learn a little bit about that in this tutorial. So here is a URL to Free Software Magazine's article from quite some time ago, but it talks about the Autotools in more detail: Autoconf, Automake, Libtool. And I recommend that if you want to learn a little bit more about the workings of these programs and how to use them ultimately. So let's talk about building Emacs, and let's use the example of manufacturing a robot. Okay, so I want you to visualize a robot. Emacs is a robot, and it doesn't exist yet. And it's just on a planet like Mars. It's just sitting there and it's grasping around, looking to see what's around it. It's going to grab those resources and it's going to build itself, going to turn itself into a really cool Emacs robot that we can use for all these wonderful things. We can talk to it, we can get it to code for us, we can get it to organize our scripts, it can write our code for us, it can do all these amazing things, but it has to build itself. And that's what we're talking about here. So if you want to get your software built, these Autotools are how you can do it. They create a configure script, and that's typically in a release file. But if you do not have the release file, like if you cloned the repository from source, and then you use these AutoGen, Autoconf, these Libtools to kind of make the configure file. So we're really talking about if you're using Git and you're cloning the repo, the original source repo, that's where you have to start talking about using the Autoconf and the AutoReconf commands to create that configure script one more time. So how does it work? Well, configure, you're creating this blueprint. That's what configure really does. That's what Autoconf and configure, they do. And you want to think of these engineers and architects that are drafting these blueprints, okay? They're specifying every component and capability in your robot that's going to build itself. So Autoconf and configure, they run these little programs on your computer system, these test programs. They reach around your computer system, they find out what resources are available, and then they tell Emacs, they give it a plan to build itself with the resources that are available on the system. So you can think of kind of like a manager walking the floor of a manufacturing plant, checking to see what parts are there and taking an inventory and then deciding how we're going to build this Emacs robot. So the configure options, this is the configure script. We call this script with options, and these are like customizing the tooling really, or even deciding like if there's just a million parts on the manufacturing floor, but we only want to use a few of them, then we have all these options that we can add in. We can say, don't use these parts, don't use those parts. We can say, I want you to build with this specific architecture. We can say build aggressively so that we can get some more customization in terms of the architecture on the computer system. We can decide if you want to build for one market or for another market, whether or not your robot is going to fly. All of these things are done with these two types of options. We have the dependencies, and then we have the configure options. And so that's really what we're talking about when we talk about the configure options. we are talking about orchestrating how the linker script will make the software. And you get to see it happen once you run make, or once you run configure. You get to see this happening in your command line. It's checking for GCC. Yes, it's like watching the automated build control system in action. And that's what we're going to do in this tutorial. So stick with me here, and we will get through to the exciting part where we're going to build Emacs from source. So with everything prepared, it's time to activate the assembly machinery and watch your creation take form. So this is where we use make and Makefile. So what is Makefile? In Emacs production, the Makefile, it's like a master production sequence. It arranges the components to assemble the parts to connect the modules and the precision tools that are going to be used in each stage. The make program is like the factory floor. It orchestrates the manufacturing floor, brings everything together. It follows those blueprints that were created for the finishing product and into some lower level machine code. So it takes the source code, the logic, and the behavior, and it turns it all into this lower level machine code, which you probably know as an executable. So by the end of the make process using Makefile, make is called on the linking command, that's GCC, on the system I'm using, Ubuntu 25.04, to produce this binary file, this executable, which you would probably recognize on a Windows system because of the exe extension. But after the binary is created with the make program, we're going to use this program called make install. It's not the same as make, doesn't make software again, just installs it, copies these compiled binaries and associated files such as the documentation, the libraries, and configuration files to their final destination on the system. So the system, the default destination is user local bin or user bin. And we want to think about, we have a configure option where we can change that destination. If you don't change the destination and you build Emacs from source and then you install it, it's going to override any other installations you have, and it's going to change your desktop, your little menus that come up in your desktop. And if you were on WSLG, that would still happen. It would happen on your Windows system. You'd get a different program. So we do want to use these configuration options to change the location. If we want to have multiple versions, we want to keep an old version, we want to have some specific type of build, okay? So in terms of the standard production sequence, this is really it. This is everything. We've got Autoconf, configure, make, sudo make install. And when we do the Autoconf or the auto reconf, we do that because we don't have a configure script. When we download the files from the release tarball, which we did in the last video, you have the configure script. You don't have to do the Autoconf or the autogen. And if you clone the repository, it's a really big repository. Maybe you don't want to clone all those files, but if you did clone all those files, then you would be running this autoconf or auto reconf. And then we have this make, sudo make install. We do the sudo because it's going to install some programs into our root directory. And this represents the complete manufacturing pipeline. We've got validating components, customizing the blueprint, setting up the assembly line, activating the production floor. That's it. That's the whole thing. So in conclusion, in this lesson, you saw how Emacs is built using a classic open source tool chain, starting from Autoconf and the configure template. You learned how portable configure script is generated and how that script walks the floor to determine which dependencies on your machine. You examined how configure arguments options let you control where Emacs is installed and which features are enabled, and how the make program assembles all the parts into the final product, the Emacs robot. And in the next two videos, we're going to look at the dependencies and the configure options before building and installing Emacs from source on Ubuntu 25.04. So thanks so much for watching, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the next video.